Okay, Chris, will you give me a background about your flight, your pilot experience, training, career?
First of all, thank you for inviting me today to speak a little bit. The more we get out there, and the more people will understand kind of what's going on in our skies. Um, I have been flying since I was 14 years old. I just retired this last year. Stayed on with the airline I was working for as an Airbus instructor. So I'm still quasi-retired, but I've got somewhere near 30, between 30 and 31,000 hours of flight time. Started out working in Southern California. Started out working with the movie industry and kind of worked my way on up, and ended up here in Hawaii eventually. That was the reason, or the reason for that was the fact that I was working for Japan Airlines and they required us to be based out of here. It was actually a subsidiary for Japan Airlines called Jalways, and we were all based out of here. So moved from big Los Angeles to little Honolulu. Yeah.
And what was your first encounter with the topic of UAPs or UFOs?
We've talked about it for a long time, and being pilots, of course, your curiosity is piqued. Flying around at night all the time, we see all kinds of different things. Meteors, the space shuttle. Even saw the tether pull away from the space shuttle, and it looked like a red curlicue in the sky. It was really kind of neat, actually, to watch that. But we've seen all kinds of anomalies, and the one thing I always laughed at was I said, at that time, I said, "Hey, I've been flying 35 years, and so many thousands of hours of flight time, and I've never seen a UFO or a UAP." And the UAP coin term has just been around for a while, but I always wanted to see one. And I got that opportunity one night flying back from Japan to Honolulu. And we were around 40,000 feet. And the next thing you know, um, it was, oh, well, it was early in the morning, just where there was a little sliver of light on the horizon. And so just kind of relaxed and kicking back, and the night was going by real well. Next thing you know, something caught my eye, and I looked, and sure enough, three huge discs. I mean, these are not small, uh, huge disc, and it's hard to estimate the size just because of where we're located and where they're located. I don't know how far away they are, but they were actually still in space. They hadn't entered the atmosphere yet because they were glinting. The sun was reflecting off of them, actually. They were in a triangular formation. And as they came in, the sun, since it was still over the horizon, was reflecting off of them and then back down to us. And we were just in awe. And as they came in, they sat there for a few seconds, and it looked like they kind of reoriented themselves. And then, boom, gone. Instantaneous acceleration, gone over the horizon. The whole thing took about 20 seconds. And, even still to this day, it still makes the hair stand up on the back of my neck thinking about it. That was back in 2005, almost 20 years ago. And it was such a fantastic experience. And people ask me, were you afraid, or, were you scared, or how did you feel about it? And basically, I felt privileged to have seen it. I didn't feel scared. You know, obviously wondered what it was. And way back in 2005, we didn't even have iPhones back then. So it wasn't like I could, take out my iPhone and take a video of it or anything. And it was, I guess you could say, it was a life-changing experience,
Mm.
because what happened to me after that is I became very interested in UFOs and UAPs and what's actually out there. It opened up my mind, is what it did, because beforehand, I'd said, I haven't seen anything I can't explain, and blah, blah, blah. And then all of a sudden, when you see something like that, and it wasn't only me, it was the entire crew and another aircraft actually that saw it at the time. And as we saw it, we were just gobsmacked. Actually, it was just, there wasn't a lot of conversation going on. It was just like, oh my God, they actually exist. And it was it was such a neat experience, and we still talk about it to this day. I keep in contact with the other crew members, and unfortunately, they're a little bit more hesitant to come forward because they're not retired yet where I am. So uh, I can come forward a little bit more. Matter of fact, we had other UFO experiences of late, recently, and we weren't able to come forward with it because when we did, we were actually told by the company to shut it down. That I worked for at the time, they said, we don't care what you do on your own time, but do not involve the airline in any shape or form. And this kind of that happening to us actually changed my interest in the UFOs or UAP experience to how much of this is going unreported because pilots are afraid to talk about it. And I got involved with another gentleman by the name of Ryan Graves. I'm sure you're familiar with him.
Yep.
And got involved with Americans for Safe Aerospace and the reporting systems, and found out that I would say 50% of the pilots that I were flying with, oh yeah, I see those things all the time. And people just now, it's so commonplace, it's not a big deal. Matter of fact, when we were seeing them, we were bringing up the flight attendants so they could actually look out the window and say, oh my God, they actually exist. And it's really kind of interesting to watch the way they react to it. Either they're scared because it kind of flies in the face of their reality and their maybe religious beliefs or whatever, or they become very interested. And it, for the most part, it's because they become very interested. That I'm interested more even, because I can talk to them, I can bounce ideas back and forth off of people that aren't pilots to understand their thinking of it. Now, pilots were very data driven and we're very, it's supposed to be very logical and highly trained, and we are. But the thing is, when you see something that kind of flies in the face of reality, or what you know is realistic science, and kind of moves into that quasi-science field, you end up with a lot of stumbling blocks ahead of you. And you don't even want to talk to it, excuse me, talk about it to your family, because there's still that ridicule and that the people that would chastise you and roll their eyeballs back and think you should be wearing a tinfoil hat, even though it's realistic. And 50% of us are seeing it. And I would say the other 50% aren't looking for it. They're kind of being the ostrich with the head in the ground, or they fly along with the lights on at night, or they're just not looking because they're there. And, I mean, you look at things, and some I'm sure are military, some are experimental aircraft of some type. But what we're seeing these days is more something in the way of, it's not satellites, because they're in a circular orbit and they're kind of in the same spot all the time. And then all of a sudden one will go zipping off this direction and do some weird maneuver. There's no strategic or tactical reason to do what they're doing. So it's not a drone, obviously, because a drone isn't going to peel off and do a loop and then disappear. It's almost like they're saying, hey, we're here. They're almost like doing a self-disclosure thing. So it leads me to believe, one, it's not military. Two, it's not civilian, obviously. Three, it's not Elon Musk and his satellites, because they move in a lineal type of fashion. They can't continually curve. And four, the propulsion system needed to do that hasn't been invented yet. So if you had something in space that was continually changing trajectory, which goes against physics, you need a propulsion system that would help it to do that. And to have that continual for months at a time in the same area, it just isn't possible with the technology that we know we have. And the reason I put that kind of in quotation marks there is because we don't know what's being back engineered. We don't know what we do have in our possession. And recently there's been a congressional meeting that they had, well, two of them, one the former July and one just a few weeks ago, about UAPs and the safety of aircraft. And this is where I've become involved, is what kind of safety factors are we looking at with UAPs? Are they a danger to us? Because it may not be a collision danger, but is it a communication danger? Is it a navigation hazard? Is it something that's going to interfere with our GPS systems? Is it something that's going to be distracting to the point where it might cause an accident, or maybe already has? So these are all factors that I've been looking at and been trying to work with Americans for Safe Aerospace. And I mean, we have a lot of different groups. You have Enigma, you have NARCAP, you have Aero, you have all these different groups and MUFON working to kind of bring this information in. There's no one centralized point. And all this data that's coming in, if we can actually kind of put it in a central database and remove the junk that is either AI or that people will put in there just to screw with the system, and make it a real science, a data-driven or data-based science, it would be something where we could actually not only learn from it, but be able to explain it to people. Because I have a lot of people come up to me and they know I do work with UAPs and UFOs, and they ask me, are they real? And I said, they're real, yes, but we don't really know what they are. And I wish I could explain it. If I could explain it, that would be the $1,000,000 question. I would be able to stand up there like the CIA whistleblower or whatever and say, hey, look, I know what it is, but I don't. That's probably why I haven't been visited by the men in black.
And what, as a pilot, what is the training for identifying phenomenon or objects outside of your aircraft? Zero.
Zero training for that. And that's the thing. Airlines aren't interested in that. They're interested in making approaches. They're interested in flying the public safely from one point to the other and not having the public know that we're up there seeing UFOs. Mm-hmm. So they don't do any training. The only thing that they do is try and muffle it right now. And that's one thing I would like to get the airlines involved and the FAA involved and bring it together with the Americans for Safe Aerospace or any organization actually that can bring all this data into reality, bring it into the fold. Because if we can collect that data and kind of figure out what's going on, then we can figure out whether or not it's actually a safety factor to aircraft, as well as maybe what it is.
Do you think that airline companies are concerned about their reputation if they start investigating this?
Absolutely. I've experienced it firsthand. And where they said, hey, take everything you have off of social media because we don't want them to know you guys are up there basically seeing UFOs or UAPs. And I can understand where they're coming from. Passengers that aren't used to, the science of UFOs or UAPs might be a little hesitant to think, oh, their pilots are up there seeing things. Well, we have to pass physical exams every 6 months or so. We have to pass mental exams as well, plus be trained in the aircraft, plus simulator checks and line checks. And it's on and on and on. Your training never stops. One thing that hasn't been included in that training is things or how to react to UFOs or UAPs. And right now, at this point, I mean, it really doesn't need to be in there. The only thing we need to do is be able to train. If you guys see something, this is where we want you to go with the information. This is what we want you to do. This is the database that's going to help us figure out what's going on out there. And you can have all kinds of things in the cockpit that are electronic, but they all have to be certified, or what we call STC, to be in the cockpit and operate while the aircraft is in operation. Now our EFB, electronic flight bags, which also are video, most of the time they're iPads, we can use those. So, I mean, things can be photographed or video from that. But other than that, we're not really supposed to be, up there with a video camera or, something with night vision capability, video camera or whatever. So in order to get this thing to work, we have to bring the FAA into the fold. We're saying, hey, look, if you guys want to use this, this is good. These are the things that are allowed to be used up there. Or even better, if there would be an organization that could go to the FAA and say, hey, look, we have an STC device. We have the device that's been cleared by you that we can put up on the dash, that where the pilots will be completely out of it, and it will be able to pick up, any anomalies and record it when you get on the ground or even in the air, because we do have Wi-Fi capabilities now in the air, be able to directly download it without. And one good thing about that, let me kind of digress here. One good thing about that is the fact that that data is hard data. It can't be interfered with by a person. So in other words, no AI, no no one changing the darkness or lightness or whatever. So when you get that data, it's hard data, and it's something that can be used to identify something. Whereas otherwise, if you're getting data from pilots and they're taking it from their cell phones or they're taking it from the UFPs or whatever, you don't know if it's been manipulated or not. So that's kind of unfortunately, that's where we are right now. We don't have the ability to have other than video taken from the aircraft by pilots with using their phones or the EFPs, because nothing is STC'd. So it would be nice to be able to get something in place where the FAA is working in concert with the airline and with the pilots for reporting. And it would help everybody, because I mean, let's face it, not everybody believes in UFOs, UAPs until you're out there and you go, oh, okay, now I've seen one. I was one of those people. I'd flown for 35 years and hadn't seen anything I couldn't explain one way or another. And then all of a sudden, boom, there it is one night. And it changed my whole world. And that's what we're kind of hoping for, is that people will go from this non-belief to believing and then understanding. So after believing and acknowledging, then you come to learning and understanding. And if you can learn about it, understand it, then you can understand whether or not it's going to be any type of safety concern.
What was the sorry? What was the impact? You said earlier it changed your worldview. Like, what do you think it did in your life seeing that?
It opened my eyes to what's out there, or the possibility of what's out there. And obviously, all this stuff that we're seeing up there, some of it I'm sure is military, but what scares me, if it was another government of some type, then we're in real trouble if it's another government doing that, because we wouldn't have that technology. And the reason I really hesitate to say that it would be military is because it doesn't operate in any type of tactical or strategic fashion. It's almost like saying, hey, we're here. One I saw come down out of the sky, stop, split into two. This one went this direction and did this weird curly Q thing, and the other one shot off directly to the left. So, what kind of tactical or strategic reasoning is there behind that, other than to say, hey, we're here? Or, it could be a test of some type. Who knows? I wish I did know. But the things we're seeing are not any types of current known technology. Luis Elizondo has come up with the observables, the 5 observables. Whether it can cloak, whether it has instantaneous acceleration, whether it has any propulsion device that's visible, whether it has any aerodynamic type of wings or anything that would make it fly. And then also instantaneous acceleration is the big one that we've seen a lot of. There's no way that anything biological, without having some type of anti-gravity technology, would be able to come straight down out of the sky several thousand miles an hour and stop on a pinpoint and split into two and then take off. So if we had that type of technology, geez, we should be using it in everything. I mean, why would the government be keeping it secret unless they're testing with it or something? But where would we get that technology? Extraterrestrial or interdimensional travel. Now, we don't know whether it's coming from other planets or interdimensions. Even Einstein said there were many more dimensions than what we can tell or know about. So where are these things coming from? How are they getting here? Are they coming through portals, or wormholes, or how are they transporting themselves? Because let's face it, if they had to come from 500,000 light years away to here, well, guess what? 500,000 years ago, what did we have walking around the earth? Not much. Maybe a few dinosaurs here and there, or whatever. So why would they come and visit the earth and then all of a sudden go, oh, there's people here? So you got to look. There's got to be some type of transport medium. These things, obviously they can go transmedium because they go underwater, just like what the Navy pilots have seen and posted. They can go from air to water, and even sometimes they think they see it going in and out of volcanoes. And in Mexico City is a big one. But who knows? We don't know. But if we can collect some data on it, maybe we can kind of get some type of idea.
So do you feel that they are trying to make their presence known to at least some people?
Yes, yeah, I think so. Because, you look at disclosure. Um, if they came down and landed on the White House lawn and said, "Hey, we're here, take me to your leader," what kind of problems would that cause? What would it do to the political era or the political aura, excuse me, in Russia or China? How would they feel if they came down and landed on the White House lawn and did that? Or how would we feel if they went to China and landed there, in Beijing, or if they went to the Kremlin or something like that? How would we feel? Like, uh-oh, now they've got their technology and we don't. So it would be something that could actually be a separating um, or a hostile act in some way, not from them being hostile, but maybe between the nations. Also, how would the people react? Would it bring religion closer, or would it take religion farther away from it, or both? I mean, it could do both. People that are just saying, "Oh, look, it's the devil." You
Hmm.
could get somebody up there that is uneducated or non-believer and thinks it's the devil, and I'm gonna kill me some aliens. you know you're gonna get people like that, as well as people that are educated saying, wow, we need to find out who these entities are and get technology from them because they can actually help us. Now, I'm sure if there are several, like Paul Hellyer, the former defense minister for Canada, and a former space minister for Israel, talk about there's more than one type of entity supposedly visiting us, and if so, who's benevolent, who's malevolent? Who are the nice guys? Who's the good, the bad, and the ugly here? Uh, are we able to deal with the right ones to get good technology? And there's so many questions, theological questions, as well as just humanity questions that can be answered. But to answer it, we have to find out what they are and who they are, or what type of entities they are.
It seems to me that so far their behavior seems pretty benevolent. It doesn't seem to be that aggressive.
Well, this is true. What about people that are being abducted or whatever, too?
That's true.
You talk about mutilations and this and that. From what I understand, people say, "Hey, how can these things come all the way across the universe and then crash?" Right? They come here from coming billions of miles away and they crash. Why? Well, I don't personally think that they're crashing. I think they're being shot down, and not by us. I think the benevolent ones don't want the malevolent ones to be able to interfere with our society. I'm sure they have something like, and it's so bizarre because when I listen to myself say this, it's something that is, a few years ago I would have just said, forget it. I'm not going to say anything like this. But the fact is, are the entities that we're dealing with the benevolent ones shooting down the malevolent ones so they don't interfere with our society? Because it's supposedly, and if you look at what Paul Hellyer said, they're have this galactic federation, if you want to call it that. That's what they call it, where they are actually uh, trying not to interfere with us. Now, whether or not they changed our DNA through time and they're just sitting back watching us, kind of like children raising children or watching the two brothers battle together. I don't know. And there's a lot of people that say these things have been here for thousands and thousands of years. And the evidence is starting to lean that direction, that they've been here longer than we have been here. And if so, how have they manipulated our DNA, or how have they either helped us, or how have they been in the background doing things to manipulate where we go, or have they been? So it'd be kind of interesting to find out, don't you think?
Oh yeah. I mean, there's so many questions. I feel like it's unfortunate that we're at the point where we can't quite go to those questions yet because we're still in the kind of phase of trying to prove it to many people. I think It's a weird one because I think it also shows how different people are. You know, people can be open to something or people can be just completely write it off. And I'm not, I don't, again, I think I would, I tend to believe people. So when you tell me as a pilot you've seen something, my automatic response is to say, I believe you. My automatic response is not to dismiss something. I would like to have my own experience just for myself, but um, it's interesting that people have a preconceived notion and then they operate from that ground, which to me is unscientific. You don't come to a situation with a preconceived set of assumptions. You're supposed to be objective. So I find it quite a bizarre world view to just dismiss something out of hand.
Right. Well, even Ronald Reagan, when he was talking about things, he said, trust but verify.
Hmm.
So when you're talking to people, yeah, you can listen, trust what they're saying, but look to verify it as well. And even where I'm coming from, I talk to guys and they're obviously seeing Starlink. I've seen a lot of Starlink satellites, when they deploy and watch them in a nice little cute line, and then they kind of start dispersing, and as they're rotating, they're reflecting the sun and things. And I've had some guys say, "Yeah, well, I saw this." And I was like, "Oh wow, really?" And you don't know where they're going to go with it until they start talking about was in a line and say, okay, well, that's Starlink. But I don't make them feel ridiculed by telling me that. I'm like, wow, okay, yeah, I think that might be Starlink, but please keep your eyes open because there's a lot of stuff out there. So if you're seeing something in a line, I'll explain to them what to look for when they're looking for Starlink. So that way they don't feel belittled. But on the other hand, they feel like, hey, look, he wants to know if I see something out here. So they'll keep their eyes open. And that's where I want things. I want people to keep their eyes open up there and not feel afraid to either come to me or go to one of these organizations and actually give their data to them and tell them what happened. Because pilots, unfortunately, are, kind of tight-lipped on this stuff because they don't want either ridicule from the company or ridicule from their friends or, reprisal from the company as well.
It seems quite odd though that pilots feel that way, seeing as pilots are, I don't know why any pilot would want to make this up or want to like lie about it. It doesn't seem to be particularly beneficial to them or their career. So it's an odd situation.
Well, yeah, it's just like me. I get nothing out of this, basically.
Yeah.
Um, the only thing that I want to do is I want to bring other pilots into this fold so we can do data collection. I want to help this turn into something where we can figure out what's going on out there.
And when you said you saw three
Yeah.
spherical discs,
Mhm.
and were they moving as one combined sort
They
of like
were,
system?
yeah, they were, even to the point when they came down and kind of reoriented themselves. They were moving as one unit, and so obviously they're intelligently controlled.
That is mind blowing. And what's the fastest capability of like what's the fastest speed of a satellite that we
Well,
have?
usually things around they're orbiting the Earth are around 17,000 miles per hour,
Okay.
and it depends on their distance from the Earth and what they're trying to do. We have a lot of geosynchronous satellites as well, and you can tell them because they'll sit in the same spot and they'll flash with their solar panels on the sun. They'll flash in a regular type of fashion. But what we're seeing out there, when they're making 90-degree turns and instantaneous acceleration away, that's not any type of satellite, and that's no type of technology that we know of today.
So satellites, can they do downward movement, upward and downward movement?
No, they're
No.
in. No, they do a linear type of trajectory. Even when they deploy the Starlink, it takes a long time for the satellites to move out from the initial line. So it's not like they go poop and they're here. That it takes a long time because they move in a linear fashion. They they can use thrusters to move slightly, but it's not like they're going to be going here and then 90 degrees straight down or something. that technology doesn't exist, especially um, when you're talking about going from maybe outer space down to sea level almost instantaneously.
Okay, this is
I
interesting because it's the one I'm just trying to. I had one experience myself when I was in the countryside in Ireland, and um, you can see everything because there's no real light pollution.
mhm.
Uh, but I saw something moving up and down, and then to the left and to the right, and I thought it was a satellite, but maybe not.
Nope, not so.
Okay.
You've seen a UAP as well.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well then yeah, I was baffled by this thing that I saw. It kept doing this kind of a movement up and down, and then it went left, right, left, right, left, right. And then it sort of just I stopped seeing it then. So
Yeah,
that's
even
pretty
some of the pilots have even brought my wife, who's one of the flight attendants, up to the cockpit to show them what they're seeing outside, and she was like, "Yeah, this thing came down and did this and did this, and we're going back and forth, and it straight up and disappeared." You know, so
what do you think about some of the other I've been looking to some other cases of kind of like where lots of people have seen them, and I know the most famous one is the Phoenix lights.
correct.
Um so that seems like a very different type of object to the one that you saw. And what do you think do you think that's what you're talking about, different types
Yeah,
of
yes,
craft and species and
yes, and who knows? Maybe that was something that the government was working on at the time
yeah.
that they had back engineered, and we're seeing what the reaction of the public was as well.
Mm.
So that's what's really hard to tell now is what's back engineered and what's actual extraterrestrial or interdimensional travel craft. So I don't know what we have and how they're testing it.
And do you think that the route that you fly is a particularly active route, like that route that,
We've seen them in the northern hemisphere and in the southern hemisphere, but it appears that yes, this one particular route there, it's really hard to tell again because of your spatial orientation to things. Um, but it appears to be in what we would call a flap. In other words, a group of UFOs in a certain area at a certain time, and then it dissipates and goes away. And it seems like then they'll show up somewhere else and somewhere else. And I kind of did a little calculation myself here and there, and it seems like we're seeing them over Japan as well, and we're seeing them up to the north toward Alaska. And if you look at it, it could almost be over military bases or it could be over nuclear facilities. Um, from my understanding, they're very interested in our nuclear capabilities. And this could be some type of way of observing our nuclear capabilities. And whether or not they've already, stopped a nuclear war or not, I don't know. There's some um, speculation that they may have already stopped that in the past. Don't know. But what we're seeing are definitely groups, and they appear in the same area over a long period of time. And then we'll see it in like the southern hemisphere as well. Also coming back from Samoa or Tahiti, we see them out there, and to the point where one of my first officers one time was saying, "Flash your light at it, flash your light at it," and see what it does, see what if it reacts in some way. So we did that, and it didn't really react to us. So I don't know, if they would or not. But some of the people on the ground I know they use little laser pointers and point the lasers at them to see if they react as well, and which I've seen reactions to them from that before.
and what are the reactions?
It will sit there and then zip away.
Oh,
Yeah, so it's like all of a sudden, oh, we're here. We see some. We know that you see us. We're gone.
wow. So it's a weird they obviously have an understanding of our maybe own self-determinism or something, like our non-interference or something like that.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure that they are capable of receiving our transmissions and stuff like for television, and I'm sure they're able to see things. Hopefully, they don't see too many alien movies, but uh, I'm sure that they have some idea of what we're all about. Yeah, and that if we're again, are they trying to self-disclose or not? And maybe some of them are, some of them aren't. Who knows? This is what's so intriguing to me. What is going on up there?
What about passengers on any of your flights? Have they had encounters?
No, no.
No?
First of all, the window is what? Let's be around.
Yeah, yeah.
So, they'd have to have their face plastered out there. And then there's two windows. There's the inside plastic pane and then the glass pane as well. And it's very difficult to see anything at night. But again, now you talk about the background lighting or whatever. At night, if we turn the cockpit lights way down, we have the best view out of anybody in the world. It's like the best telescope you can possibly get. The viewing they have some up on the mountaintops here in Chile, and they do that because there's less light and because there's less atmosphere to go through. Well, we're up there at 40,000 feet, so what better platform would you have than that?
And if you could give a rough statistic of, like, let's say per year, the amount of flights that go on, or I don't know the exact number, but it's obviously, there's so many throughout the world. What percentage of pilots worldwide do you think are encountering UAPs?
That's a good question, but more and more are coming forward. I think more people are more pilots are actually looking outside now and looking for something unusual. Where beforehand they just look up and think it's a satellite, because they saw some movement out of their eye. But now they're actually looking at it. And it's not, and this is what's really interesting. It's not just a phenomena in the US or North America, it's throughout the entire world. Some governments are more forthwith in putting out information, and others obviously withhold information. Now, the United States is at the point where all of a sudden Congress is involved, and where it goes from here, I don't know. It's interesting to see the interest that the government has all of a sudden had since these videos were released by Navy and Luis Elizondo. And I have to give that guy credit, man. He stuck his neck out so far, and he kind of got it cut off. And they did a disinformation program on him and everything else. But he got these videos out there and got them to the right people in the New York Times and Miss Kane. They were able to get it to the right people to get it exposed, and I really have to hand it to him. He's done a good job.
What sort of time frame do you think would you give until it's maybe we get something more significant in terms of evidence release or something more concrete?
That's a good question to start with. I wish I had a good answer for you, but I don't. It depends probably on the stability in the world. It depends probably on how open or how easily received this stuff is now. How much more open we are to receiving the information coming in, or the data, or the sightings.
Do you think that there's sort of a limited amount of time though that it can be maybe suppressed because the internet is just seems to be changing our society so much in terms of what information can be accessed?
Again, that's really interesting you ask that. Yes and no. I think that there's going to be real data out there, but how do you get, how do you ferret out the real data from AI or somebody, a government disinformation program? Um, there's even a higher bracket of need to know information than the president of the United States. And how do you know they aren't doing different disinformation programs? Muddying the water. You don't. And that's the thing with the internet. I mean, obviously you can make or put whatever you want out on the internet, but that's why it's so important to have the real data collection, like I was talking about, that's electronically downloaded from the aircraft. immediately goes into a data bank and can't be interfered with.
So the last, I have just a few more questions, Chris. That's right. And
No, no problem.
um, one thing that I was wondering, and I've wondered about this topic for a long time, is that I don't know whether there is a kind of, I don't want to say spiritual element to it, but like whether you want to say consciousness or whatever it is with our species, are we reaching a certain stage where we're kind of going into the next level of where we can't continue on to operate the way we can without annihilating ourselves. So we have to kind of try to bridge the next gap, and that could potentially be the reason why we are now interacting with different entities from the universe or wherever they're from.
That's a good assessment of kind of how I feel as well. I think that what's going on, and the reason this disclosure is going on now, if you want to look at it as being a disclosure, is the fact that I think that we are more ready to receive it. And maybe, and I've also heard that some of the entities are interested in, they do these abductions and are doing physical exams and whatever, because they're interested in our soul. Why do we have a soul and other animals do not? And why they're interested in it, because apparently they don't have one. And they're wondering about why we have this soul, or why we have this religious belief system that we do. And, I mean, part of religious beliefs, of course, is maintaining sanity within the public scope of things, maintaining morale or morals, either one, keeping, if something happens, be able to lift people up and think that there's a reason for it, or if something doesn't happen, why it doesn't happen as well. And you can explain that with religion, where if you didn't have the religion, how would you explain it, and I think that's kind of what's going on now. Some people are, looking at this in a religious aspect. Well, you can look at it either way. You can say, in the past, have we had these entities that people thought were angels that helped to guide us in life, that were actually, extraterrestrials, and they had no other way to explain it other than angels? Or, then you have the fallen angels. Was it another bad group, or a malevolent type of extraterrestrials? So, I mean, there's all this paranormal stuff going on all of a sudden. And with mass media, a lot of this stuff's getting out there. So people are not only finding out about things more rapidly, but they're also able to get all this information. Now, sometimes you have the information overload, and again, that's where religion comes to it. Faith, religion. If you have all this, they just have faith in what's going on. Then you have a way of releasing, this stress that's put on society by this. So yeah, there's definitely, coming back to what you're talking about, there's definitely a religious aspect, a morality aspect in it. And the thing is, have they been around for a long time, and have they actually helped us form our morality? Don't know. It's an interesting question, and it would be neat if I had some answers for you, because I could probably tell the lottery numbers for tomorrow, but unfortunately I can't answer those questions for you.
That's okay. No, it's very interesting. I feel like it's hopefully the conversations that we'll be having more of going forward in the future as a society. Just my last question is on in terms of the uh for pilots, and what would be the best case scenario? What would you like to see happen most in terms of the future with pilot encounters with UAPs?
Well, like you were talking about training before, I would just like a simple little blurb. If you see something, don't be afraid to report it. Don't be afraid to say something. And that's where we need to get with this, where the companies aren't going to ridicule or demoralize people that see this stuff. Or, I mean, I understand the fact that the airlines can't allow free access to the social media to put on whatever they want, because then it would become a free for all. Hey, look, I saw this, I saw that. So, but we need to find some way to do the data collection that the airlines agree with, the FAA agrees with, and the pilots are trained on. And then once we get this data, we can assess it. We can kind of figure out what's going on, and then where to go with it for aircraft or aviation safety. And again, my biggest part of what I'm concerned about is aviation safety. And are we, in trouble with these things up there, or are they just benign, and we should just go on our way?
Okay, brilliant. Thank you so much, Chris. I'm just going to stop the recording.
Okay.
Um,